We are live.
Sorry about that. I have 4 o'clock. I'm going to call the meeting to order. And I will do roll call. Linda Bove. Brittany Buchanan.
Here.
Lynn Davison.
Here. Having camera issues.
Michael Gordon.
I'm here.
Dean Howard.
Here.
PV Jantz.
Hello, I'm here.
Mike Manley.
Here.
Myself, Suke Kneifel, and President David Nigro.
Present. Thank you, Suke, for starting the meeting. And we can go on to item 1.02, introduction of new board members and recognition of board members leaving. So as you'll notice, we're back at full strength. So that's great news. We've had the governor's made some new appointments. First we'd like to recognize the service of Dr. Mark Sims. Dr. Sims was on the board for many years. He was president for a number of those years. He led the superintendent search where we found Superintendent Reichman. And he was a stabilizing force through a difficult time of the agency, some years ago. So we certainly thank Dr. Sims for all of his efforts on the board. We also thank Shelley Herbold for her service. Shelley was on the board again for a number of years. She served all of last year without kind of beyond her appointment while facing a very serious health issue. And she was still able to perform her duties as a board member. And, for that, that's incredible dedication to the agency. And we're all very thankful for her contributions and her willingness to serve during that difficult time for herself personally. So that's, again, we're all very thankful for the service of Dr. Sims and Shelley. We have 2 new board members. We have, and I'll let them introduce themselves. We have Brittany Buchanan. And Brittany, if you can come on and just tell us a little bit about yourself, that'd be great.
My video won't let me start. Okay, there we go. Sorry. So I'm Brittany Buchanan, one of the newest board members. I have a daughter. She actually recently just passed away in December, but my connection to ASDB is she was considered deaf blind and was diagnosed at 6 months of age. I also have 2 other children, an 8-year-old Liam, a 2-year-old Lachlan. I have been married to my husband for 10 years and I'm an EMT. So super excited to be appointed and in this position, and I'm ready to be here.
Excellent, Brittany, welcome. And we're certainly happy to have you. The other new member, PV Jantz. PV, if you can turn on your camera and let us know a little bit about yourself.
Hello. Sure, good evening. My name is PV Jantz. I currently work at as the ACDHH board representative appointed to this board. I am the chair of ACDHH's board, and I am thrilled to be part of ASDB's board to represent ACDHH, as well as the deaf community, as well as I am a community partner helping kids work through their education, as well as transitioning into successful employment later in life when they have graduated from high school. Thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to working with all of you.
Excellent, PV. Thank you for that introduction. So with that, welcome to the new board members. And we will move on to the next item, 1.03, call to the public on agendized items. In these, again, because we're doing this virtually instead of time, we're limiting it by words. And we'd asked for public comment be sent to the public comment email address and be limited to 500 words or less. We've received, I understand, several comments, which Suke is going to read for us. One of them is a video, and I understand that after the Suke reads the written comments, we will play the video as well. That was emailed to us as well. So Suke, you can begin with that.
Okay. The first comment I have is from Jimmy Wilson. I am James Archie Wilson IV, a graduate of ASDB, Arizona School for the Deaf and Blind, in May of 2012. I want to share the story of my upbringing. I was born in Flagstaff, Arizona, to a hearing family. We lived in Page, Arizona for a few years before moving to Tucson, Arizona, so that I could attend Arizona School for the Deaf and Blind. While growing up, my primary language for communication with my hearing family was American Sign Language. Fortunately, I was given a wealth of opportunities. I went to deaf camps, attended youth leadership conferences, played in various sports tournaments while growing academically. I would like to mention that I was 3 years old when my parents found out I was deaf, and they didn't know what to do for my future in regards to education. There was a lack of resources for the families of deaf and hard of hearing children in Page. Fortunately, my grandfather was the one who knew about the deaf community and deaf schools, including Gallaudet University. He was a professor of 3 different universities. One happened to be at ASU in Phoenix. So he guided my parents and stressed the importance of language acquisition at an early age. Ultimately, my parents decided on placing me in ASDB in Tucson. Along with myself, they and Grandpa too learned a new language, ASL. Not only did I have access to the language ASL while growing up, I also had access to educational and social opportunities in a language-rich environment. Such opportunities have shaped who I am and who I'm going to become. If it weren't for my grandfather, I wouldn't be who or where I am now. I am extremely fortunate to be where I am now. Even today, not many families have access to such information or a grandpa like mine. SB 1092 would ensure that all of families have access to resources and services and that their children don't get left behind in language and literacy acquisition. I was extremely fortunate to be having these opportunities while growing up, and I want the same experience for other deaf, hard of hearing, and deafblind children. Like any child in Arizona, they deserve it. All of the deaf and hard of hearing children deserves a total enriching educational experience I have had. Please support HB 2863. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate it. The second comment is from Mark Hansen. Know that Arizona Schools for the Deaf and Blind is most eminently qualified to provide instruction in the primary language of choice for the deaf pupils. They have the right staff that is properly trained in special education and uses that correct language of choice. So I do not understand why the most rightful school gets denied the necessary funding. Is this an unintentional act of asphyxiation or chasing our state's goal to eventually close the best school for this unique purpose to provide correct method of instruction and an equitable environment for the deaf students to thrive and prosper? Please do not fail to give the HB 2863 bill wholehearted support all the way. Thank you. Comment number 3 is from Astrid Goodstein. Chair Nigro and the members of the board. Thank you for this opportunity to share my comments with you about item 7.01, discussion and possible action related to HB 2863. I ask that you take a vote in support of HB 2863 and make a public statement to that effect. I am Astrid A. Goodstein, a retired school teacher, professor, and administrator. I believe I speak on the behalf of many people in the field of deaf education, parents of deaf, hard of hearing, and deafblind children, concerned individuals, and alumni of ASDB PDSD, many of whom have become successful in their careers as teachers and professors, service providers, scientists, lawyers, business owners, etc. It is also true that too many students transfer from other schools to PDSD and ASDB at an older age, already language deprived and academically challenged. Teachers and service providers at ASDB, PDSD are certified and highly qualified to work with all students to ensure that they grow linguistically, emotionally, and socially, and reach their potential as a total person. The providers themselves should be totally involved in the whole process: coursework, IEPs with parents, grading, maintaining transcripts, leading to diplomas from ASDB and PDSD. They definitely are to be held accountable. ASDB as an LEA certainly should also be accountable for its curriculums, program, assessment of language, and literacy development, among other things. Make no mistake, ASDB already has been functioning as an LEA for many, many years. They should continue to receive funds and grants from different sources. I understand that the current bill includes a clause that further legislation may be needed when the ASDB board completes the strategic plan. This should address your concerns, if any. Your vote of support will send a strong message to both campuses of ASDB and the community at large, as well as ADE, that you believe in the good of ASDB per the ASDB Policy Manual Section B. It is the right thing to do for all deaf, hard of hearing, and deafblind children and their families and dedicated ASDB staff. Thank you. Comment number 4 is from Mary Rimron, AZAD Chair. Dear Chair Nigro and ASDB board members, we request that you vote to support HB 2863 during your board meeting on March 4th. The Arizona Department of Education has historically interacted with ASDB Tucson and PDSD as if they were local education agency LEA. ASDB Tucson and PDSD are qualified and certified educational institutions that deserve the LEA designation. Now is the time to put this in the state statute. It has been a practice since the school was established. A strong message was sent to the community at the December board meeting. The motivation behind the decision not to send a bill to the legislature classifying ASDB as an LEA is unclear and can only lead to speculation. Now that HB 2863 has passed in the House and is in the Senate, it is critical that ASDB take the for position. This will allow Dr. Annette Reichman and Maria Murphy to do their jobs and advocate for ASDB Tucson and PDSD at the legislature. The consequences of not supporting HB 2863 will impact each and every student and employee at ASDB Tucson and PDSD. Losing Title I, III, and IV money during a pandemic is absurd. Teachers and staff are being pushed beyond their limits and need more support now, not less. Please make a strong statement that the ASDB Board of Directors supports HB 2863. This action is keeping with the mission of ASDB and the powers and the responsibilities of the board members as stated in the ASDB Policy Manual. Finally, in order to avoid a conflict of interest, we kindly request the Arizona Department of Education Representative Mike Manley recuse himself from voting on this issue. Sincerely, Arizona Association of the Deaf, President Jason Schmidt, Arizona Association of the Deaf Education Committee. The next written comment is from Linda Bove. Hello, ASDB board. My name is Linda Bove. I regret I am unable to attend the meeting today. However, I would like to share with you that I was Linda, the librarian of the Sesame Street cast for more than 30 years. I am deaf and primarily use American Sign Language, ASL, to communicate in my role on the TV show. I had the good fortune to expose kids, both deaf and hearing, to ASL for access to communication and as a teaching tool in many situations, often with the Muppets. That was fun. To this day, I still get comments from the older people who watch Sesame Street about how they appreciated learning a new language from Linda the librarian. I am proud to say I volunteer my time with passion to serve on 2 school boards, one in New York and the other one here with ASDB. I am here today as a concerned member of the ASDB board. I believe ASDB should be legally recognized as an LEA. ASDB is what I call one-stop shopping for each child that goes to the school. ASDB is equipped with many different services by qualified teachers and specialists who are experts in deaf education. This ensures that the child has full access to language acquisition and literacy development, as well as access to her or his emotional social development. Each child would be surrounded with ASL as well as other modes of communication all day at ASDB and offered additional support services as needed. At home, according to the statistics, 90% of their parents are not able to communicate with their deaf children and need to learn along with their children. I wish I could show you my high school diploma to you. I was proud upon receiving it at the School for the Deaf in New Jersey, where I grew up and became a whole person in and out of class. The diploma states New Jersey School for the Deaf. This is to certify that Linda Bove completely satisfactorily the prescribed work of the school. When I opened it again before I came here, it sure brought back the memory of the feeling of great pride. I would want the deaf and hard of hearing children at ASDB to experience this too. Some alumni of ASDB are now successful in their fields as lawyers, business owners, actors, educators, etc. I urge you to vote yes in support of HB 2863 quickly and get the ASDB recognized as an LEA so that the school remains to be performing their responsibility as it has done in the past for 30 years, does today, and will do in the future to be on equitable terms with the school districts or better. Thank you very much, Linda Bove. And the final public comment would be the video.
Hello, my name is William Boehm. I'm retired from teaching at the California School for the Deaf at Berkeley and Fremont for 33 years. I have also been a short-term and long-term substitute teacher here at ASDB in Tucson for 10 years. I'm here to talk about HB 2863. I was shocked to learn that ASDB here in Tucson did not receive federal funding. And they have historically received federal funding. The Arizona Department of Education, ADE, did not pass on Title I, Title IV, IDEA, or Medicaid funding. ADE decided to send ASDB students' data back to their home districts. Home districts that do not educate deaf children. They would be held accountable for students' learning, even though ASDB provides comprehensive educational services for their students. ASDB would no longer be able to offer diplomas to their students, something that ASDB has been able to do since it was founded. ADE decided that the School for the Deaf and Blind no longer qualifies as an LEA, a local education agency. even though it has been considered one since it was founded and has received the associated federal funding without any issues for many years. Who has more expertise in deaf education? ASDB or ADE? Come on. ASDB are the experts. I support HB 2863 to classify ASDB campuses in Phoenix and in Tucson as local education agencies, LEAs, to receive federal funding. HB 2863, as amended, was fully supported and approved by committee. Again, why does ADE, which is not an expert in deaf education, take away from ASDB as the deaf education experts and give it to local agencies which are not educating deaf children? That is truly offensive to us. I hope that ADE and the ASDB board will decide to join us in our efforts to support HB 2863 to invest in deaf students' education and job preparation for the future. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Suke. We can proceed to item 1.05, information item. I'm sorry, 1.04, information item, executive team reports. This is board members in your board docs. You'll see reports from human resources, IT, and operations. And again, since I know there are a couple of new board members, I'll try to do a little bit more explanation than I normally do. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to review those reports. If you have any questions for the staff that have prepared them, now will be the time to ask them. But I'd also have asked Superintendent Reichman if she had any additional comments beyond that. No? Okay. Great. So are there any board members that have questions for the staff regarding their reports on operation, information technology, or human resources? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to item 1.05, Assistant Superintendent Report, Assistant Superintendent Rex. And again, new board members, I'll refer to the reports that are found in board docs that you've been able to review prior to the meeting. And Superintendent Rex, you can begin with your report.
Thank you. Good afternoon, President Nigro and board members. You have my written report about the early learning program, our campus programs, the blind program, deaf program, our regional itinerant programs, and the organizational development division. But I do want to update you on the following. We are still serving families in the birth to 3 remotely. We have not been cleared to go back into the homes to do home visits. Our preschools are continuing their blended schedule to safely serve our students at both campuses. On our campuses, both of our teachers are continuing to teach in person, but also using the digital learning platform. There are currently 77, roughly 30% of the students at PDSD, and 22 or 20% of the students from the Tucson campus that are still using the digital platform. The rest of the students and staff are in person and on campus. The regional cooperatives are serving students both online as well as in person, depending on the district's preferences. Our regional directors are preparing for their statewide advisory council meetings that will occur this spring. Tonight you have before you some agenda items that shows the work of many dedicated staff members who participated in screening, interviewing, and helping with the selection of Region 2's director, as well as a selection for a new principal for Phoenix Day School for the Deaf. And that concludes my report.
Dr. Rex, is there an anticipated time where we're going to resume early intervention in-home visits?
I know that Dr. Kendra Benedict is working with AZIP and they have a task force. And so soon as we have more information on that, I can send that to the board in an email as an update.
Okay, and I just want to be sure they're looking at, if there's some trepidation about going back into a home, that they can look at either alternative venues, meeting outside, meeting, somewhere where there's going to be good ventilation or something like that.
Absolutely. Our teachers are very creative and they will find ways of working with the families in the place and the space that's most comfortable for them.
Okay, thank you. Are there other board members that have any comments for Dr. Rex? No, okay, seeing none. And again, for the benefit of the new board members, especially over Zoom, we try to give some long pauses, make sure that everyone is able to open up their video and their mic in case they want to speak. It also gives some time for the interpreters to do their work. We don't want to overload them. So that's why there'll be some long pauses there. And I want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to speak should they want to. Next item is 1.06, information item, superintendent's report. Superintendent Reichman. You have the floor.
Yes, good afternoon, President Nigro and the ASDB board, Assistant Superintendent Dr. Rex, and ASDB community. About 5 minutes ago, some of you may have heard a dog barking. Well, yeah, that was mine. That was my dog. I had forgot to turn off the audio and mute myself. I apologize for that. So I just wanted to take a few minutes to say thank you to two board members. Shelley Herbold and Mark Sims. Those two board members were here when I started as superintendent in 2016. During the first few months, I had an opportunity to talk with both of them. Shelley Herbold, her goals for the agency, I asked her why she was a part of the board, and she was giving her goals for the agency. And she said, as a deaf person and a mother of deaf children, that she wanted ASDB, PDSD, both schools to become more academically rigorous. She wanted us to set higher expectations for our students. And she was really concerned about the educational outcomes for our students. And that's what she meant by her goals while she was serving on our board. And that influenced me to really start figuring out how can we raise the bar and set higher expectations for our students. That then started the school improvement activity. Secondly, Dr. Mark Sims, the first few months that we worked together, he was president of the board. And he told me his goal for the agency was to look at the early intervention and preschool programs, birth to 5. And he strongly believed that ASDB should be focusing on the birth to 5 population, that our deaf and hard of hearing infants and young children needed access to language, to have a language-rich environment where language acquisition could happen in a first language. And we did have some disagreements about that, but we were on par with that goal. I could agree with that as well. But that also influenced me to focus on how we can work with our birth to 3 program and our 3 to 5 preschool program. And that started the shift, and that became our early learning program. So I want to thank those 2 board members for their contribution, their action, and support to ASDB. Thank you. And I also want to welcome Miss Brittany Buchanan to our board. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. And I would also like to welcome Mr. PV Jantz, who is a VR supervisor and now joining our board representing ACDHH. It's awesome to have the 2 of you here today. I'm sure you realize that this month is our 1-year anniversary. Anniversary of what, you might be thinking? The COVID pandemic. That's right. Just last year, March 2020, our world was turned upside down. And we went through a really disruptive change, rapid changes. Starting off with Governor's Duty Executive Order that all schools in Arizona were to close, and that included ASDB. You recall that experience. We worked hard in 2 weeks to transition to a full online system to provide education. On our campuses, those teachers had never experienced remote education in the past, and they had to rapidly figure out how to provide educational opportunities during the spring semester to our students. And that included early intervention teachers providing remote opportunities to family instead of going into the home to provide services. Our itinerant teachers were also providing specialized instruction and support to students across the state virtually. Truly changed our entire agency. Throughout this spring semester, as you recall, then we went through summer and we started planning and preparing for the fall, trying to figure out how can we get back to school in person, in the classroom, safely for our students and for our teachers. Do you recall that video of the two principals showing you what it looks like they create a safe space in the school in the fall? We were trying to figure out what the classroom would look like, what the hallways would look like, what the playgrounds would look like, what a bus ride would look like, how to enforce masks, social distancing, hand washing, and sanitizing, and how do we keep ourselves safe? And we thought we would be opening up the first week of August. Well, then you know what happened. That didn't happen. We had to continue to provide remote education through the fall, and we called it educational opportunities. It wasn't actually education. There were curriculum subjects. So that first 3 weeks before August, the teachers were working diligently to transfer their educational materials to a virtual platform. They needed to learn new technology skills, for example, Google Classroom, to provide education to their students. So in the fall, the students continued to stay home and access virtually their learning environments. And then in October, students returned to the classroom. 2 weeks later, Tucson campus opened up as well, and the students were back. And the two campuses were able to successfully continue in person in the classroom until December, at Christmas break. Whew. Our teachers were exhausted. And then looking to January, we knew that with the Christmas holiday and New Year, the spread was on the rise, and our principals had determined to keep our schools closed and to continue the virtual learning through the month of January. And we did that. During that time, the two principals and the teachers started to realize that our students were done with the virtual learning. They weren't doing well. Those students were not paying attention. They were not engaged in discussion with their teachers. They were distracted, and some students actually disappeared. That's when the principals decided we have to get back to the classroom. So the first week of February, we were back in the classroom. And as you just heard from Dr. Rex, most of the students are in the classroom. Some are still virtual, and we're providing a hybrid option. And the same thing goes with our itinerant services. Teachers are going into the school, providing specialized instruction and support to students in person, as well as providing some virtual. And early intervention is continuing with virtual learning. And we are hoping, fingers crossed, that as the numbers become more stable, as the curve is flattened, we'll be more back in person, which means we can breathe. And start thinking about the future. Start thinking about next fall. Our leadership team is now having conversations about what the fall will look like. And fortunately, we have the vaccine, right? So more and more of our teachers and our staff are getting vaccinated. We finally have a light at the end of the tunnel, and we will come out. But that brings up a question. So when we come out, will it be normal? Will our normal be the same as last year before March 2020? Does that mean we can go back to March 2020 and then just move forward from there? Probably not. I think you all agree. We can't go back to March 2020. Our world has changed. So we have to figure out how to adapt and make decisions with the new normal.
So how do we do that? First, we stop, take a pause, and think about this new normal. Try to figure out what the future might look like. While we do that, we need to remember our guiding principles. Remember that we have our operating principles, that ACT, accountability, collaboration, and transparency. And we have committed to making data-driven decisions. We will not make decisions without good data. We have also committed to continuous improvement efforts. So those guiding principles will help us to stay focused. We have also gone back to March 2020 and looked over our list of projects, our initiatives, to look at which ones we want to implement again. I'll give you a few examples. We have a contract with LMA to do a workforce analysis of some of our employees. And we want to do that workforce analysis. We wanted to do the workforce analysis in the spring, but we realized that it wasn't the right time. So we pushed that off to the fall, but we will still do that. That analysis will give us a lot of information about students' needs and how we can best staff to meet those needs, not overstaff and not understaff. We need to find the right amount of staffing to meet student needs. So for example, we will reestablish our language and literacy committee that we started last year, but we had to put on hold in the spring. We will start that up again and begin looking at how we can improve and support our students with their language and literacy skills. We are going back to looking at the bilingual grammar curriculum, or BGC. We started that about 1.5 years ago. We provided training to some of our teachers on how to use that curriculum to align it with our National Geographic curriculum and help students to acquire English literacy skills at the same time as ASL. That was somewhat paused last spring because of COVID, but now we are going back to that and reestablishing training to move forward with that BGC on both campuses. We are purchasing the BGC curriculum to support the teachers in that English instruction alongside the National Geographic curriculum. So that gives you some examples of the projects and initiatives that we will revisit and focus on again. I think Dr. Rex just mentioned that our early learning program is looking at the future. They are considering whether we will be back in parents' homes to provide services 100% as we were before. All of our early intervention teachers were going out into parents' homes to provide direct services and support to families who have young children birth to 3 who are deaf or blind or deaf and blind. So they're considering whether we will go back 100% in person. I suspect that it will become a hybrid model where we will offer both in-home visits, as we did before, visiting the families in their homes, as well as virtual support. I do believe it will become hybrid, so it will look different in the future. Our itinerant services are the next topic. It used to be that all of our itinerant services were provided in person on an individual basis. Our teachers were driving all across the state of Arizona, going to schools physically on campus to meet with students and provide direct service to those students with specialized instruction and support. As you recall, prior to the pandemic, we were beginning to pilot some remote or virtual services with just a few students, about 20 to 30 students initially. You just heard Dr. Rex saying that we are currently serving 140 students remotely or virtually. So the pandemic did accelerate the process of offering remote or virtual instruction. In the future, again, I believe it will be a hybrid model where we offer both in-person and virtual instruction, depending on how we can best meet each individual student's needs. I could say a lot more, but I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap up now. When we think about the future, your role as a board and your involvement with the strategic planning that you have been doing in establishing 4 pillars for us to follow. Do you remember the pillars? Excellence in communication and relationships, outstanding student development, superior organizational culture, and effective resource management. Those are the pillars that we as an agency will implement moving forward, and we will fit our plan into those 4 pillars. I would say that right now, it is more important than it has ever been for you as a board to provide us as an agency with direction so that we can move forward into the future with your guidance. And we need your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Reichman. Are there any questions for the superintendent on her report? Okay, seeing none, we can go to item 2.01. Action item, approval of the consent agenda consistent with board policy to include items 3.01, 5.06, 5.07, 5.08, 5.09, 5.10, 5.11, 5.12, 5.13, 5.14, 7.03, 7.04, and 7.05. And again, for the benefit of the new board members, the consent agenda is where we put items that we can dispose of together in one foul swoop, so to speak. And they're items that are typically routine items So you'll see something like approval of renewal district agreements, 3.01, and you'll see approval of donations and the minutes, et cetera. So that said, that doesn't mean that we can, that we have to do it all at once. If there's any board member that would like to remove one or more items from the consent agenda, they can just talk about that, and they can, if they like, make a motion to pull one or more items off the agenda, and that would have to be voted on by the board, and then we'd pick them up in the regular order of the agenda. But we do this to dispose of some of these items, collectively, but again, we're open to pulling any of them off. So I see that PV, your video is open, so you'll have the floor.
Yes, thank you for recognizing me, President Nigro. I would like to make a motion that we withhold agenda 5.14 from the consent agenda because I have a conflict of interest.
On 5.14, okay. I can do that, or if there's a second, I'm sorry. So I see your motion. If there is a second, someone would need to second it, and then we would need to vote on it. Suke second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay.
Aye.
All right. All opposed? No. Okay. So the motion passes. We're going to have 5.14 is now not on the consent agenda. Are there any other motions or comments from the board to remove additional items from the consent agenda? PV?
Hello again, and thank you for the recognition, President Nigro. I would like to make a motion on the consent agenda as amended, that we approve the consent agenda as amended.
That you approve it as amended. Okay. Is there a second? Mike Manley seconds. All in favor say aye. And again, for the new board members, you can say aye. You can hold up your thumb. Zoom, it's a little bit different than what we normally do. So looks like we all have ayes. Any opposed? Aye. Okay, and the consent agenda will pass as amended. We will go down down to 3.02. Action item, approval of new district agreements. These district agreements that are new are typically not on the consent agenda items, as the renewals are. Dr. Rex, are there any comments that you have on this, or?
Just the board has asked in the past that we make sure that we signify when we add new agreements. We have a lot of returning agreements, as you saw, but we are adding Somerset Academy Skyway Campus to our ASDB family. So I just wanted to make sure the board knew that when they voted on that consent item.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve 3.02?
I move that we approve 3.02.
Okay.
I'll second.
Is there a second? Okay, Mike Gordon seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. Natalie and PV. Okay. All opposed? None. Okay, thank you. Item 4.01, information item, finance report, Shana Cooper.
Shana Cooper, Executive Director of Business Services. Good afternoon, Board President Nigro, Superintendent Reichman, Assistant Superintendent Rex, members of the board, and the ASDB community. Our most recent Finance Committee meeting was held last Thursday on February 25th with board members Manley and Gordon and Superintendent Reichman. The formats, as well as more detailed information, was provided and discussed with the committee. And in summary, we reviewed in detail and discussed the January 31, 2021 and 2020 budget to actual comparison reports, the available cash balance, student enrollment, student teacher ratios, and filled full-time equivalents, and the grant revenues and expenditure reports. We also reviewed the school year 1920 and school year 1819 instruction and shared service revenues and expenditures, which also included the average revenue per student, average cost per student, and the average voucher reimbursement per student. I did note in the meeting that that specific report will only be prepared on an annual basis, and it is difficult to do the calculations when all financial activity for the school or fiscal year has not been completed. Provided to each of you is the most same financial data that was provided to the Finance Committee, but just in a more condensed, summarized version. But before I jump into the financial report, I did want to share that the Joint Legislative Budget Committee baseline book was published in January 2021, and the fiscal year 2022 baseline report for ASDB shows an estimated $928,000 increase in our appropriated funds from the fiscal year 2021 amount of $37.3 million to a tentative fiscal year 2022 amount of $38.2 million. This increase is attributed to the anticipated growth in revenues within the Schools for the Deaf and the Blind Fund from our institutional vouchers, which is about $667,000 in growth, inflation of $240,000, as well as the State Land Trust Endowment of a little less than $22,000. With that information, the team will begin the budget planning process, and this will include working with the various departments, developing projections, and all budget requests will be carefully considered. However, with any such process, there may be requests for funding which will not be approved, but those items that we will be considering and will be prioritized include items that will be required by law, contracts, grants, and/or agreements, items that we've identified to meet our agency's strategic goals, items that result in or offset by any additional revenue to the agency, and any items that provide a net long-term benefit to the agency. I also wanted to point out that since our January 14th board meeting, ADE did award ASDB about $348,000 from the CARES Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief, also known as ESSER 2, and the allocation amount was based on our non-LEA status. The funds are highly flexible. However, they are designed to help address local recovery efforts related to responding to COVID-19. And if you recall, we used the CARES ESSER 1 funds of approximately $40,000 for items such as postage, supplies for mailing out student packets, the Zoom video license, hotspots, iPads, Chromebooks, as well as the Google Chrome license for each of those. The team is working with our Director of Federal Programs, Melissa DeVries, to develop the budget for the $348,000, and we will submit that to ADE for approval within the next few weeks. I anticipate that we will use those funds to continue to purchase computer devices, software, PPE, and safety supplies. We're also trying to identify ways that we can continue to provide social, emotional learning, and mental health supports for our students over the summer. We will also use the funds to reimburse ourselves for already incurred COVID-related expenses that were not previously budgeted for in our original budget. Now on to the financial report as referenced on page 1 for enrollment as of February 1st, 2021. ASDB had 2,206 students, and as of February 1st, 2020, there were 2,151 students. So there has been an increase from last year to this year of about 55 students. I do want to point out though that on the bottom of page 1, it was an error on my part, but the school year 2021 was not updated to reflect the February 1st, 2021 count of 2,206 in the chart that shows the student enrollment type by disability. So please accept my apologies for that. On page 2, you will see though, as of February 1st, 2021, there were 549.6 filled FTEs and 812 staff members. There were approximately 60 vacancies actively being recruited for, which include teachers, instructional and residential service assistants, interpreters, bus drivers, and other various positions. On page 3, you will see the financial summary based on the comparative data for January 31, 2021 and January 31st, 2020. Our collected revenues for budget fiscal year 2021 shows $14 million, which is 1.8 million lower compared to last year's amount of 15.8 million. And again, that's primarily from the decline in the federal and state grant revenues, as well as the reduction in Medicaid reimbursements that we've received this year. Rental income has also gone down, as well as the gifts and donations that we've received thus far. Our total obligated expenditures are right at about $35.2 million, which is about 1.3 million higher when compared to last year's amount of 33.9. And most of that, though, is due to an encumbrance of about $1.5 million. And again, that's related to external telecommunication charges, electricity, janitorial, rent, as well as repair and maintenance. Additionally, we've worked with ADOT to order vehicles for our agency fleet replacement that relates to the $1 million allocation from the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund, which was established by the CARES Act. There is an expenditure decrease, though, of about $636,000, and most of that's due to a decrease in professional and outside services, travel, and food, and most of that is as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. On page 6, you'll see the report that shows you our budget to actual expenditures, as well as the remaining balance by object class, by fund, as well as by each of our various programs. And on page 9, you will see a new report that I thought would be beneficial to everyone. And that report shows you how much of our January 31st expenditures, totaling $31 million, where we have spent our day-to-day functions or activities. You'll also notice as of January 31st, we've spent about 69% of our expenditures providing instruction and student support, and 12% in agency administration. The remaining 19% are in the areas of plant operations, transportation, food services, as well as our 2 statewide deaf and blind program services. And then on page 10, so far for January 31st, 2021, we are still showing a deficit of about 3.3 million when you compare actual revenues to the 27.8 million. Again, that includes what we've received as well as what we've expended from our general fund appropriations to the 31.1 million in expenditures. Now, what does that mean? It means we've had to use our June 30, 2020 available cash balance, which was at that time 11.2 million. This is not of any particular concern right now, as there is a month-long delay of when our voucher revenues are received to reimburse us for expenditures we've incurred for the instructional site-based campuses, our preschool program, as well as our regional itinerant services. We're also still waiting on reimbursement from expenditures incurred on several of our federal grants that we do have. And as a reminder, we do not receive all our appropriated funds of the $37.3 million up front. So those funds are received on a quarterly basis from the state. As such, I've been having to closely monitor our cash balance, as well as making sure that any other funding sources are utilized prior to us getting our monthly voucher revenues from ADE, as well as before we get our quarterly appropriate allotments from the state. Based on, again, the review of the financial data, as of right now, there are no immediate material concerns based on what we do know for the remainder of the budget fiscal year. And if there are no questions on any of the information that I've presented, that concludes the report of our operational and fiscal data.
Thank you, Ms. Cooper. Are there any questions about the financial report? Ms. Cooper, I do have one question. Can you let me know when the money from ADE for the ESSER 2 funds, when was that transferred?
Actually, it was awarded maybe a little less than 2 weeks ago, if I'm not
2 weeks ago.
mistaken. And so
Okay.
we'll work on submitting the actual budget proposal, and then we'll get the approval shortly thereafter.
Okay. Do we need to enter into an IGA to receive those funds?
No.
No. Okay. Great. Are there any other questions from other board members? Okay. Hearing none, we're going to move on to 5.01, information and discussion item, personnel changes of Shana Cooper, Jillian Wetstein, and I apologize if I am mispronouncing these names, Rosetta Hicks and Amber again, I'm not sure if I'm going to say this right, unfortunately, Akapanitis, I believe. Pursuant to ARS 38-431-03A1, the board may vote to go into executive session for the purposes of discussion and consideration of employment matters. Superintendent Reichman, if you can just begin on this one.
If I could interrupt for a moment, we will not be discussing Amber Apkapnitis during the executive session.
Correct. I
She
think
wants any discussion about hers in the open session. So you will only be discussing those 3 names. Okay.
correct. Well, I guess Superintendent, I believe that we would if there is discussion of her, it would be in this item, but it would be in the open session because it was her request. So if when we discuss the others, we can do that under the exception or the under 38-431-03, we can discuss the rest of those folks in the executive session, but not that one individual. But we'd have to do that in this item out in the open. So at this point, to discuss some of the personnel changes, I think it's typically we do enter executive session. So do we have a motion to go into executive session to discuss these matters? PD?
Actually, thank you for the recognition, President Nigro. I would like to recognize Amber's request and make a motion that Amber's discussion of personnel be removed from the executive session. And I also move that we go into executive session without Amber's name involved for discussion.
Okay. Thank you, PV. I think, and the motion will be on the floor, but from this perspective, we would go into executive session to discuss one or more of the other individuals. We can come out of executive session, and without moving on to the next agenda item, we could discuss Amber. We can discuss Amber anything anyone has to say. The motion that, and I'll give you an opportunity to amend it. It would just go into executive session, and it would be limited to the discussion of the other folks on this agenda item.
So again, to clarify, do you want me to amend my motion now?
I think it would be helpful just to amend it to say we'll go into executive session to discuss employment matters.
Okay. I will amend my motion now. I'd like to make a new motion that the board goes into executive session to discuss personnel.
Okay. Is there a second? Great. I see a second. All in favor? Say
Aye.
aye. Aye. Okay. All opposed? No? Okay, great. Through the magic of technology, we will go into executive session.
Do I not need to read this before we go into executive
Yeah.
section?
Yes, you definitely need to read that part before we go in.
Okay, so pursuant to ARS 38-431.03A1, the Board of Directors may vote to go into executive session, which will not be open to the public for the purposes of discussion and consideration of employment matters.
Thank you. Right. And we are out. As we've come out, I don't see everyone, but what we're going to do is we have gone 90 minutes so far, so I'd like to take a 10-minute break to let the interpreters take a break and make sure that they're well rested. So let's take a 10-minute break. We'll come back at 5:44, and we'll be on break. So.
Can you guys hear me now? Yes?
Yes.
Yes,
Yep.
yes.
Okay, great. I think let's see. Can I hear you?
Can you hear me, David?
I can, yeah. All right. I had some, okay, I think I have some mic issues, I think. So now that that's resolved, thank you. We are back in 5.01. Superintendent Reichman, if you can have the floor and discuss anything else that needs to be discussed in this point.
I have nothing more to discuss.
Okay. And to be clear, we do have Amber for discussion in this 5.01. So, and again, she requested anything that be said in the open session, which we're in now. Is there any discussion to be taken on Amber?
Yeah.
Lynn?
Yeah, I just want to make sure, she'll be a new principal taking it, and I know she's been there and has been around Courtney, but I just want to make sure there's a lot of supports available for her to make sure that she can find her way down this path, and that also feedback is considered and listened to from staff, from community, from parents, stakeholders, districts, to make sure that everything is working and going along the way it should, so that we can provide the supports that she needs. But I just want to make sure that all voices are heard, and to make sure that this school continues making progress going forward, and keeping a positive atmosphere where everybody feels good about what they're doing.
Thank you, Lynn. Superintendent Reichman?
Yes, I agree. Amber will be a new principal at PADSC, and we would provide her with a lot of support. We all want to see her succeed, and because her success is our success and our students' success. So we will be providing her with internal supports, and that includes Dr. Rex will be there supporting her. We have several other people from the ODD, the Organizational Development Division team, will be providing her support as well. Amber has been involved with the leadership training. I do believe it was last year. For 1 year, she was involved with NISL, the National Institute on School Leadership. And she did get her certification from that. And I believe Amber is a good choice, and we will commit to providing all the supports we can.
Okay, are there other comments, UK?
This is more in general with all the discussions that we have held in this regard today. I am actually very pleased to see that we are sort of looking within and looking at succession planning and moving staff up in positions. I think that is something that has been needed for a while, and so I'm just in support of that. So.
Okay, thank you. Are there other comments? No, certainly I hope that we're able to give Amber the resources she needs to be successful. It's certainly a very important position, and I wish her I hope that she does really well. Should we, adopt to offer her a contract in a later item? Okay, so seeing there's no more comments on that, we can move to 5.02. Action item, intent to offer fiscal year 2022 new employment contract to Sheena Cooper, Assistant Superintendent Operations and Support Services. For this, do we have a motion on the floor to take this action?
So,
This is Sukay. I move that we take the action to offer the 2022 new employment contract to Shayna Cooper.
Okay, is there a
I'll second
second?
that.
Mike
I'll
Manley
second.
seconds. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, no opposed. That motion passes. We can go to 5.03, intent to offer, action item, intent to offer fiscal year 2022 new employment contract to Gillian Wetstein, Director of Business Services. Would anyone like to, Lynn?
Yeah, I move that we pass action item 5.03 and offer a contract to Jillian.
Okay, is there a second? I see a second, Brittany, thank you. All in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay, the motion passes. 5.04, action item, intent to offer fiscal year 2022 new hire employment contract to Rosetta Hicks, Region 2 Director. Do we have a motion to take an action?
This is Sukay. I propose that, or I motion that we take the action on action item 5.04, intent to offer fiscal year 2022 new hire employment contract to Rosetta Hicks.
Any seconds?
I'll second it.
All right. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? No opposed. Okay. That motion passes. 5.05, action item, intent to offer fiscal year 2022 new employment contract to Amber Akapnitis. I apologize if I'm not pronouncing that right. Phoenix State School for the deaf principal. PV, I see your hand is up.
Hello. Thank you for the acknowledgement. I would like to make a motion that 5.05 related to Amber Akapnitis, make a motion to assign a new contract for principal of Phoenix State School for the Deaf.
Okay. Any seconds? Brittany is seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And that item passes. We'll go down to 5.14, consent agenda item, which is no longer on the consent agenda item, or on the consent agenda. Intent to offer school year 21-22 teacher employment contracts pursuant to ARS 3843103A1. The board may vote to go into executive session for the purposes of discussion and consideration of employment matters. One, is there any, if anyone would like to go into executive session, please speak now. Okay, seeing none, does the board have any other discussion or a motion to extend the contracts as proposed? Lynn?
I move that we extend the contracts as proposed and we pass 5.14.
Okay, all in favor? I'm sorry, there's a second?
I'll second it.
I see Sukay seconding. All in favor of that motion, please say yes or raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And then I'll ask for abstentions after that.
For the record, I will abstain.
Okay, yeah, I was just gonna ask for any abstentions, and so PB has abstained. Okay, great. Thank you. Now we go on to 7.01, discussion and possible action item, state legislature bill, Superintendent Reichman, pursuant to ARS 38-43103A3. The board may vote to go into executive session, which will not be open to the public, for discussion and consultation for legal advice from the board's attorneys as it relates to this item. So Superintendent Reichman, perhaps you can, do you have anything initially to say on this matter?
Yeah, my comment will be brief. It's about House Bill 2863. February 28th, 2021, the House sponsored by House Representative Udall. So that bill did pass the House, and is now over in the Senate. I heard that the Senate Education Committee will hear this bill next Tuesday. So they had passed the bill or you have the bill, copy of that in board docs. So it just simply states that ASDB campus will be an LEA for four purposes. The first purpose is to receive federal education funding. Second, for accountability and for IDEA, for those safeguards to be in place, and graduation required criteria with including diploma and transcripts. So just to simplify the bill. You, the board members, now have an opportunity to discuss this bill if you want. If you have a question that you would like to ask the AG's office, you will have the opportunity to go into executive session to ask questions from the AG Counsel, Deborah Sterling. And you will have the opportunity to take action or not take any action. It's truly up to you.
Okay. Thank you, Superintendent Reichman. And again, to be clear to the board members, if we do vote to go into executive session, it would be limited to obtaining legal advice from our attorneys. Any other comments, would have to be out here. But typically, if we're going to have executive session, I think we usually do it on the front end of the item. So if there is, are there any board members that would like to go into executive session to receive legal advice from our outside counsel? Mike?
I think I'd like to get some legal advice from our counsel surrounding this. Might not be a bad step.
Okay. All right. Well, I will move that we go into executive session to receive legal advice from our counsel. And I see Lynn seconding. All in favor say aye or thumbs up. Okay. All opposed? All right. The motion's going to pass. Sue K, can you read our statement?
Yep. Okay, pursuant to ARS 38-431.03A3, the board may vote to go into executive session, which will not be open to the public, for discussion or consultation for legal advice with the board's attorneys.
All right. So now it looks like we're out of the executive session. Okay. Excellent. All right. So now we're back in. It's been about 50 minutes since our last break. So let's keep going a little more. So thank you for that. As we come back, you know, the board will take some discussion in this matter. You know, as we've, you know, and again, just to kind of set this up from you know, historical perspective. I mean, we've had you know, a difference of opinion in good faith, I believe, with ADE for over this issue for a while, and you know, there's some question as to whether there needs to be any legislative change for the agency to be properly characterized as an LEA in certain circumstances for the campus-based programs. So you know, there's certainly an argument, and you know, likely a good argument that you know, that no legislation is needed. But there's you know, certainly there are other sides to this issue and people who believe differently. So you know, from here, and again, I'd like to take some discussion on it, but again, I want to remind the board that we can do anything we want, but we have to proceed knowing that the legislature does what the legislature does, and whether or not we like it or endorse it or make a resolution or instruct staff to support it, although maybe we wouldn't do that, but we would you know, have some kind of resolution in support of it. It may not make a difference, right? But whatever the legislature does, we have to comply with. They don't have to comply with what we say. That's the way that it works. So, you know, that's the realm that it's in, and it's, you know, the legislature does what it does, and we have to listen. And they do that on many issues. I mean, we work with policy issues all the time where they make changes to education law, and we have to change our policies. In fact, we do it at almost every board meeting. We have new changes that the legislature's made, and we have to adjust our policies and adjust our operations because of it. And you know, we don't necessarily are in support of every single one, or maybe we have lukewarm support on some, but we do it because we have to, and that's the way that the educational system works. So, you know, with that said, is there any discussion now on this particular legislative bill? So are there any board members that would like to speak on this? PV?
Okay, so I've been listening and thinking. One thing I do want to say, maybe what we think, what is the potential benefit of the board taking a position to this bill, and what are the negative consequences and I've been weighing those out, and what I've seen, the board would have more benefit than more consequences. And we can continue to play what if and go round and around, or we can say we take no position, but in my opinion, that doesn't do anything. We have to do everything we can to maximize our financial potential, and those federal funds will help the students receive their legal, free, and appropriate education, especially for a vulnerable population who needs the most support. And that's why IDEA is there, to ensure that the students with sensory disabilities, hearing and vision loss are receiving 100% full support of receiving their free and appropriate public education. So I would support that so that they can become independent adults, working citizens, and contribute to their communities. The potential consequences far does not outweigh the positives. So as ACDHH representative, we do support this bill. And I think that there is a need for this board to show support of this bill as well. And if there's any issues, we can deal with that after legislation passes, if it passes. But I think that we should show that we support it and support of the campuses having more financial support and what they need for their future.
Thank you, PV, for those comments. And just to give some of the new board members some context of how this board has dealt with this issue in the recent past. We talked about a piece of specific proposed legislation in December. We decided not to move forward with that for various reasons. And the idea, kind of one of the ideas is that we would begin to look at this issue over this, through this year. So we're nearing completion of our strategic plan, which is going to guide the agency over the next number of years. And after we were finished with that, and again, we're nearing the end of that, by the middle of this year, hopefully, that we would be able to take some time in the second half of the year and determine kind of all of the, I don't want to say hidden consequences, but all of the, what it means to be an LEA, for the campus-based schools, and what that means, and versus the services and operations that we have now, and what it means if we weren't an LEA, and what that would look like, and try to comport that with what our guidance that we have in our strategic plan. And if there's any, if we needed legislative change, we would, thoughtfully propose some at a later time. And likely that would be early next session. So that was our original kind of plan, was to think about this at the end of the other half of the year. And we're still going to do that. And I think in the legislative intent, it seems the legislature is, they've recognized that. They've there is that legislative intent that recognizes that we're going through that strategic plan, and that there may be additional changes that are needed next year should the board decide to go, in whatever direction. So that's kind of how the board is, is addressing it. This legislation kind of arose, it arose. So it wasn't something the board put forth and requested. So that's some other history for you. But PV, I see you're raising your hand.
Thank you again, President Nigro. I just want to make a point of clarification. My understanding, the discussion from the previous meeting had to do with a different draft bill. With the understanding there were some issues or concerns about that bill. And this bill in discussion is completely different from my understanding of reading this bill. This is more clean, more direct, clear, transparent, and that is what is being requested with this bill. Now, this legislation, if it passes, will this help the board with the strategic plan? If so, then the board should go ahead and support this bill.
Are there other PV?
Oh, just real quick, sorry to interrupt. If we could switch interpreters for
Okay, great. And PV, you are right that the proposed legislation from the December board meeting was very different. This is the legislation that's now pending it is very different. And it is in board docs, right now, and it is much shorter and much different. Brittany?
So, as I'm obviously a very new board member to all of this, I've heard the legal side of it, and I've heard a lot of this discussion, obviously. What, from a student or family standpoint, would be the benefit of having PDSD and ASDB designated as an LEA? What does that mean for the families and these students, if they are an LEA versus if they are not an LEA?
Sure, and I think that's a great question. And I'll ask Superintendent Reichman to expand on that in a moment. There are several federal funds that flow into the agency. Part of those are Title I funds to the campus-based schools. Part of those are IDEA funds. Part of those are Medicaid funds. I understand that there may be some funds from some of the various COVID-related acts that Congress has passed recently that the agency would otherwise be eligible for in some manner. We did hear that ADE did just a couple of weeks ago indicated that they may provide some of that funding that had some more. They had some discretion on it to award to the agency, and again, I asked Ms. Cooper about that, and she gave us some information on that amount. But those are the different funding streams, and I think I might be missing Title IV too. But if maybe Superintendent Reichman, can you maybe explain in a little more detail, exactly what those funding streams help to produce on the campuses?
I don't know that there's any direct benefit to the families, but there is a benefit to the students. When you're talking about IDEA funding, that provides monies for purchasing curriculum materials. So for example, we have used that money for curriculum to use with the students. That is what we have been doing historically in previous years. We did summer school for students. We were able to use federal funding to provide tutoring to students during the summer. So there certainly are benefits to the students. They're not direct benefits to the families per se.
When they have been designated as an LEA up until this past year, to my understanding, the students' diplomas, are they coming as an LEA from PDSD, ASDB? And now that they've lost that designation, do the students' diplomas come from like their school district? How is that? Can you clarify that?
Correct. So historically, ASDB has been issuing diplomas for our students, or certificate, if you want to call it that. When we were told that we were not considered an LEA, we had to establish an agreement with each school district and ask that school district to allow us to use our own graduation criterion. Because each school district has their own district graduation criterion. So we work with 88 different school districts in the state. Technically, we are supposed to follow their individualized graduation criterion if we are not an LEA. So part of our agreement with the school districts is that we ask, instead of us following all of these separate criteria, depending on where the student attending our school has their home district, that they allow us to use our own criteria. Our graduation criteria is in compliance with the rules of the State Board of Education. So we are complying with state law. However, the non-LEA status did create some changes for us. That's one example of a change, is that graduation criteria.
PB?
Yes, thank you, Superintendent Reichman. I appreciate your comments. Would you mind expanding more regarding the diploma situation? So if ASDB is not operating as an LEA, does that mean we have to request permission or negotiate with that district to provide that diploma? And if they say no, then what are the consequences for the students that are trying to graduate? Are they not receiving a diploma? So Annette's saying, I'm sorry, providing what? Providing their diploma or some kind of documentation that they graduated from high school, if we're not an LEA. So Annette is saying, last year, we developed a policy, an agreement between our schools and the school district. In that document or that policy, it says that if you choose to send a student to ASDB or PDSD, you agree to allow us to use our graduation criteria. So the school districts signed that agreement. So they are then agreeing to allow us to use our graduation criteria. So far, none of the school districts have said no. However, you do need to know that with 88 school districts, only 10 school districts have actually signed the agreement. The other 78 have said that they're not going to sign the agreement because it doesn't, they don't agree with taking on accountability for our students or their students in our schools. Thank you, Superintendent, for following up. So for those students in those 78 districts, those school districts that refuse to sign, what happens when those students graduate with their diploma status? The diplomas are still valid. The diplomas are still valid because we do follow the State Board of Education graduation criteria. However, with the LEA designation officially, that would make the campus's job in providing that appropriate education as the LRE for these students easier, which is that correct? I'm sorry, what was the question again? Sure. So if ASDB were designated an LEA, officially recognized as an LEA by this legislation passing, would that allow the two campuses, staff, board, superintendent, et cetera, to provide the most beneficial, free and appropriate education to these students in their least restrictive environment? Nanette is saying, from our perspective, yes. I do believe so. And PV is saying, so regarding the LEA issue and that bill before the legislature, if it were to pass, would it allow ASDB to receive equivalent funding or more funding? I'm sorry, the interpreter needs clarification. If we were to receive that designation of LEA by the legislation passing, would that allow the schools, the campus-based programs, to receive funding to operate and provide education to those students, or would it have any kind of negative impact on the budget in terms of providing education? So Annette is saying, if it passes, the Senate, then it does become law, and ASDB would work with the Arizona Department of Education, or ADE, to figure out how the federal funding would work out. And we would have the resources to support our students on our campuses. Thank you.
Okay, there are other board members that would like to speak. No, okay. Seeing none. I think at this point, PB?
I apologize. Thank you, President Nigro, for recognizing me. I would like to make a motion that the board adopt a position in favor of this legislative bill, designating ASDB as an LEA.
Okay, and I see into that. Mike, we can't hear you. Still can't hear you, Mike.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay,
now.
I'm so sorry. I need to abstain. I was sorry. My technology is.
I'm not going to call a vote just yet, but in a minute I will.
Yeah, I thought that the second, and I was trying to. My technology.
Okay, got
it. Thank you.
No, I understand. So, Brittany, have you seconded that? Is that right? Yes. Okay. All right. Is there any, before we have a vote? Is there any? We could certainly take discussion on the motion as well that we have on the table. Would anyone like to discuss the motion? No. Okay. Well, then let's discuss it. This is this really is, to be honest, this isn't our issue today. In my opinion, the legislature, put forth this bill. They can, they make legislation. That's what they do. It's no matter what we say here today, they're either going to go through with this or not go through with this. And then, of course, the governor has to sign it or not sign it. And we have to deal with that either way. Either it passes or it doesn't. And it just doesn't matter what we say today. That's a political process that's kind of separate from our board. The other part of it is, we might come back later in the year and decide that we want some different legislation. Maybe some legislation that perhaps is better tailored to get a certain effect, or not. We might not want that, and I don't know that we know enough as an agency and collected enough data to know what we want to do, or really more importantly, how we want to do it. Even if we decide to be or to try to seek to be an LEA, is this the right vehicle to do it? I think that if you go back and look at the December 3rd meeting, there was some discussion on that point. Was that the right vehicle to further these ends? And I think there are some board members that thought no, or at least that's what I heard in the comments. And I think we have to think of it the same issue here: is this legislation the right vehicle? Will it accomplish what we want it to accomplish? And is that the right vehicle? And I think there's clearly in the legislative intent, there's some acknowledgement that it might not be, that it might have to be revisited next year with more of the board's input. We've had the time to look at the facts. We've had the time to make that comport with our strategic plan to see if we can if that change, again, whether it's to be an LEA status or not, will further our strategic plan and help us improve as an agency. That said, there's, what harm is there in this bill? Will this hurt the agency, right? Because I think that's the other thing that I've thought about over the last couple of weeks or so is, if this bill passed and it becomes a law, is it going to hurt the agency? I think it's pretty clear that it won't. I haven't heard any discussion that this bill would hurt the agency or have any negative consequence for the agency. It will likely allow the agency to receive federal funding from those streams that we talked about. I know ADE has a different position, which I think perhaps some of us here disagree with. But would it hurt? Would this hurt the agency? And again, that clear answer is no. So those are my thoughts on it. I see Lynn and Sue K. I'll take you guys up. But again, we're discussing the motion that's on the table right now. So Sue K, you can go first.
Oh, sorry, hit the wrong one. So I think in regards to PB's motion, I think something that was brought up earlier, I think is worth repeating in that, in support of this, if we vote in support of this as a board, then does that give us more control is probably not the best word, but gives us more control to then vote on directing the staff, meaning Annette and the administration, to work more directly in crafting the rules or whatever of this legislation so that it does suit our needs better. And I think PB is the one who had mentioned that before. So I think that's one thing to consider. My only concern that I don't think we have fleshed out well enough is those 78 districts who have not signed that agreement. Are they also going to oppose, will they continue to send their kids with us, or are they going to then pull it back and keep their kids? And then this really doesn't benefit us in the way that we thought it would. And those would be my only comments on this.
Okay, you had your hand up as well.
I did. David, I agree with what you've said. I think we really need to consider this because being an LEA does involve the funding for sure, but there's a lot of other aspects of being an LEA that we as a board and as schools need to consider, and the responsibilities and things that go along outside of the funding. The funding's, obviously very important, but there's a lot of other aspects that I think we need to look at and be able to deal with if this is the road that is chosen for us.
Correct. And are there other comments? And Suke, can I ask you a question? And PB, let me ask Suke. I just want to ask a question about one of her comments, and then we'll get to you. Suke, in terms of the districts that are resistant or to getting their data back, I think with this bill that the reporting would remain with the agency. So all of the students' data would be collected with the agency. So when we look at the campus-based students, we're going to have N equals hundreds, as opposed to sending data back out to the districts and having N be 2 or 3 or 10 or 20 or however many students the district is sending. So this is it's essentially kind of going back to this, I mean, my understanding of it is that this would essentially go back to the status quo where the agency would own the data and have it and not send it back to the districts. But it would be, have all of the other benefits and burdens of being an LEA. That's at least my understanding, or it's, at least it seems that's what the legislative intent is as I read.
And thank you, David. I appreciate that clarification. I just was looking at it more from the standpoint, will this in fact impact the on-campus enrollment? Will we see a decline in that and maybe an increase in the itinerant services? That was more my viewpoint on it.
Yeah, thanks. So I see, to me, it's not necessarily, choosing between, I mean, to me, the decision between, if a student needs to be on the campus or needs or would benefit from itinerant services is really based on the individual IEP teams, and that's really based on student need. And would the student benefit from being on the campus, or would the student, is the least restrictive environment the campus for what those students' needs are, or is it their school support in other ways via, for example, the itinerant services and other services the home school district may have. So it's wouldn't necessarily mean that, to me anyway, because that's a needs-based decision that's based on an individual student. That shouldn't be the deciding factor of whether or not they go. People don't come to our campuses because they need that. That's the least restrictive environment. They need the services that we have. They need the campuses that we provide. And that's the reason. So, but in terms of the data reporting and who owns that, it would be the agency as opposed to the districts that send it to us, which is that was the status quo. So again, we may think about that. Certainly I'm open to thinking about that later. Is that the right thing to do? Is it not the right thing to do? We all should be open to thinking about that. But it would be a change. And PV, I think you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, President Nigro, and I agree with your comment. I think one thing for sure is that we are going to have to change and then move forward in some way or another as an LEA or without that LEA designation. We are going to have to modify our practices depending on what that ends up being. So my question to you, Annette, and for your staff is, if the board were to support this LEA designation and this legislation passes, would that help the campuses? And in terms of the strategic plan discussion, would that help develop policy or definitions, help with the budget in any way? So there are 2 points here. One is what Lynn was recently talking about in terms of the responsibilities of an LEA. We had those responsibilities mostly, and it might change some with this bill if it passes. There may be some additional, but broadly speaking, we have had those responsibilities of an LEA prior to it changing last summer. If we are an LEA, that would give us the opportunity to work with the school districts when they refer students to us. And once the student is enrolled in our school, we can take full accountability for that student, for their education, for their test scores, and so forth, and for their graduation requirements, all of it. We would take that responsibility back. We had that responsibility historically. We had systems in place. We were functioning as an LEA. That system was put on hold because we are not currently considered an LEA. We could very quickly go back to that practice. We still have the staff here who have that experience and expertise, and they are able to do the reporting that would be required of us as an LEA. Does that answer your question? Thank you. Yes, but the second question. So to clarify, perhaps this question is better to go to the board, but as far as the board, if we were to support the designation of an LEA, would that help us to kind of better establish a strategic plan with the appropriate vision in mind as a designated LEA?
If the question is whether becoming LEA first would help us inform or change the strategic plan, I think the answer is no to that, because our plan is, and again, I know you're new, so we haven't gone through this process that we've been through the last several months in developing it, but the idea is that we're going to set forth kind of the map or the roadmap to achievement for the agency. And the individual tactics that we take to get there might be different. And in fact, they might change over the time horizon of the plan. But we're going to be able to answer, but the plan is going to tell us when we get there. So as an example, if we were to decide this now, or take a position now, and say we need to be an LEA, that may or may not help us, in furtherance of the plan at this point, today. That might be different in a few months after that's finished, and after we have a better idea of the, exactly in a detailed, granular manner, what being an LEA means and what it doesn't mean, and what not being an LEA means and what it doesn't mean. That's my perspective anyway. Other board members certainly can comment.
I appreciate your comment, and I would ask, as far as the strategic plan is concerned, we as a board supporting the agency need to know what operations will look like and what our legal authority is, what our funding potential is, and what the educational requirements are that we're obligated to, the educational needs of the students that we're serving. If we are an LEA, it seems to me that would help to give us a better idea of what we're aiming toward. If we're not an LEA, we are not operating as an LEA. If we take a neutral position, if we do nothing, we're still sort of on the fence, lacking clarity as to how to move forward. I believe that legislation, if it passes, will make that decision for us. Having listened to the conversation, it seems that the campuses have been operating as LEAs with a system in place to record data and report as required. Campuses are familiar with LEA requirements. As a board member representing the deaf community and the ACDHH representative, to me, it makes sense for the board to support this legislation, specifically to give us back that LEA designation, because I think that gives us clarity in how to move forward. Being recognized by the legislature as an LEA, I think we can all see the potential benefits of that. That law provides clarity in establishing our designation. We already have the resources and the staff and the experience and the expertise who can immediately begin operating as an LEA as they were in the past.
Thank you, PB. Are there any other comments? Mike? would you
Yeah,
like to make a comment?
yeah, I'm gonna just weigh in a little bit because there's so much going on. We're back here 2 months after we voted not to go LEA, and all of a sudden here we are discussing it all again, with seemingly just the fiscal intent, or just the intent, legal intent to draw down federal money. We all had our concerns. We continue to have our concerns.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. This is PV. Point of clarification. My understanding is that the board had previously talked about a draft bill.
Yeah, we already said that. Let me just finish, okay? There's a different bill, but we did have concerns, and I recognize that regardless if we vote on this or not, there's a very good chance this will pass. The one caveat that we do have that I appreciate is that we will have an opportunity to address this later on. So they clearly put that in to seemingly give us seemingly they put that in to give us the opportunity to address this later on. So I just find it interesting that we voted on this 2 months ago, and now we're discussing it again at length, and with a certain potential futility that it's gonna happen regardless. So anyway, I'd kind of like to move this on.
Mike, I appreciate that, and certainly, it wasn't our intent to be talking about this today, but there's a bill in the legislature, and that's really what drove this conversation now, as opposed to several months from now. So, with that said, PV, some other
I
comments?
understand that, David. I appreciate it.
PV.
Yes, Mike, I do appreciate your comments, and I wasn't able to participate in the board meeting back in December. And I recognize that you all have had this conversation before. My understanding was that conversation was related to a proposed bill that ASDB decided not to move forward on. However, the legislators proposed their own bill. And my understanding is that this bill is to give some direct clarification, whereas the previous bill that was discussed was just different. So my understanding is that it was a different conversation. So I believe that it's beneficial for us to discuss this specific bill and have a clear understanding of what to do. And if we decide, I believe we should support the bill proposed by the legislature.
Okay. Thank you. Unless there's going to be further discussion, we can take a vote on this. We do have a seconded motion on the table. So so we have that motion on the table. Unless there's any other discussion, and I'll wait just a second. Then we'll call it to vote. There's the motion on the table. This is PV's motion to have the board support the bill, which has already been seconded by Board Member Buchanan. All those in favor of the motion? Okay, we see PV and Board Member Buchanan. Okay, and no others. All opposed? I'm going to say no. I'm going to say I'm voting no. Others? Are there any other no's? No. Okay. Any abstentions? It's okay. And Lynn, Mike,
I'll abstain also.
and the other Mike. So we have a 2-1. So it's not. We don't have a plurality. I don't think I have my Robert's Rules of Order at home to see if that passed. It doesn't seem, we don't have majority, but we have the plurality. So I don't think that it does pass, but so it looks like it doesn't. But thank you everyone for the discussion. And that's how we're going to go. So the next item is going to be 7.02 information item. It's I don't believe there are any. Ms. Murphy, you can confirm that.
Yes, President Nigro, I can confirm that we have no new policies to bring forth for a first read.
All right, thank you. And the next item is call to the public. We're actually, the next item is an 801 call to the public for non-agendized items. It has been another 90 minutes. I know we only have probably not that much longer left in the meeting, but I do want to give the interpreters a short break. So can we take a 10-minute break? Is that, we don't need a motion for this, but we'll take 10 minutes and give the interpreters a break. let's see. Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, I can, David.
Okay, good. And PB, I do, before I acknowledge you, PB, we're going to go to 802, but before we go to 802, which is the next item, I do want to say that we are reviewing the 701 vote. I think we do get a clarification on that. You know, I briefly was looking through some of my notes and researching that. So I'm sorry I don't have a better answer for you right now. You know, we'll look at, we're going to look into that. So that it either passed or didn't pass, but we have to look at a ruling on that. So now we're at 80201 PV.
Yes, thank you, President Nigro, for acknowledging me. And I would like to acknowledge your 7.01 conversation, and I'm not sure either.
I am not hearing. Hold on a second. I can't. Hold on just a second. Hold on just a moment. I'm having some trouble getting back from break here. Okay. Can you say something?
Testing. No, can you hear?
All right. Can we try that?
Can you hear okay?
Hold on. Now can we try that?
Testing.
Yes, got it. All right. Sorry about that. Apologies.
Okay. Did you want me to go back to where I dropped off?
Yeah. No, I didn't. We're on 802 right now. I'm sorry, 801. 801, call of the public for non-agendized items.
Okay. Thank you, President Nigro. I wanted to recognize your uncertainty about the vote regarding 7.01. And if, with your permission, can we go back to that agenda item? I have a potential solution that I'd like to discuss.
I don't think that we can go back because we've already moved on, unfortunately. But we'll get the issue as to whether or not it passed. We'll resolve it. I think our policies are maybe ambiguous. We have to cross-check with some other sources to make sure that we we get that right.
Then what I would like to do is to make a motion to table that conversation temporarily and allow that, table that rule temporarily and allow the motion to pass based on plurality rather than majority.
So I don't know that we can do that. We're not at an action item, agenda item right now. And we're not in the action item, for that purpose. So in other words, we've already moved on. We went on to 702. We talked with Ms. Murphy about the information item, and then we moved on to 801.
Point of clarification, I am a bit confused. If we're not sure whether the motion passed or failed, I think that the fact that we had technically moved on, I'm not sure that that's relevant at this point.
In my perspective, whether it's passed or failed, that we're gonna resolve that, and it either passed or didn't. Maria, I see Maria raising her hand.
Yes, Board President Nigro, I don't know if this is helpful or not, but according to ASDB policy BEDF, which is voting methods, all motions shall be carried by a majority of the members present who vote, or is otherwise required by law.
Yes, that was a policy I looked at. The questions are abstentions count as voting, and there's that's the ambiguity that I'm concerned about.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that's the ambiguity, and that's not in our voting policy, which I reviewed during the break. So that's the whether or not it passed is we'll take a look at that. We're now in 801. Call to the public on non-agendized items, and I don't believe that we have any. Suke, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And we can move on to 802, discussion and action item, agenda items for the next regular board meeting scheduled for May 6th, 2021, and whether to meet in person in Tucson or virtually. That is kind of a couple of things there. One, we asked for other agenda items that board members may want to see on the next meeting. And then two, since COVID, we used to meet in person. And now we're going to have to discuss whether or not we would like to resume meeting in person. I would say that any meetings we have in person are still going to be masked and socially distant in May. But we can have in person. We can have hybrid, where some members join via Zoom and some are there in person, and maybe all are there in person, depending on preference. And whether the the meeting is set to go in Tucson. And that's if we were to do in person. So we could change any of that. So Lynn?
I would suggest that we do hybrid. So, not knowing what May brings, that we have the opportunity, if anyone's comfortable, to be in person, and those who are not, to be virtual, if that makes sense.
I mean, to me, that sounds like a great idea. I think we've had a hybrid before, I think in the fall, and then I know kind of the rates got higher, but then also we have the vaccine now, and we see community transmission lower. That unfortunately could change, by May. Hopefully not, but the situation can be unpredictable. Suke?
I agree with Lynn. I'd like to support a hybrid idea, only because not all of the counties and cities have masking mandates and things like that. And so I would prefer to kind of wait and see what the numbers look like.
Okay, so, all right. Any others with a preference? Okay, so Mike?
David, I'd support a virtual or hybrid model also. I think this is the type of meeting that certainly does allow a virtual participation. So I'm good with that also.
Okay. All right. I'll move then that we schedule the May 6th board meeting for hybrid in Tucson.
Second.
All in favor? Let's see.
Aye.
Ayes. Any opposed? No. Okay, great. And then the other, we're still on this for any items that anyone would like to see at the next regular board meeting. Suke?
In relationship to agenda item 7.01, would it be possible to see some kind of fiscal impact on what it would look like if we had that funding and if we did not have that funding, based on the campus numbers?
Yeah, I mean, Yeah, I would certainly agree that we definitely need that information, along with all the other information that we talked about with regard to that issue. But in May, I think that's, Superintendent recommend if we can add that to the agenda. Evie?
Yes, similar to Suke's comment, I would like to add as well any clarifications regarding if the passage of this law will help with policy development or if it will help with the strategic planning process.
And for reference, we have a work study session scheduled for April, and there, again, to benefit the new board members. So we'll be meeting again in April for a work study session. So it's not a regular meeting like we have now with this, the agenda and kind of disposing of regular board business. This is going to be a meeting that's just focused on the strategic plan. So if I were you, I'd go back to board docs and take a look at some of the other meetings that we've had on this. There's a good, kind of the documentation of how the strategic plan has been built over the last several months. We're at the point now we're filling out what I like to call the bottom of the page. These are the, the particular, real fine points of the plan. We had a meeting on that, a work study session on that in February, and we've made some progress, but the agency is continuing to make progress on that. I hope to have a much closer to final version of that ready, that the staff will have that ready for us by the work study session in April. And then once we work through that, we should be able to have that strategic document almost complete for May, potentially. There's certainly potential for that. Could be another. We could stretch it to the other board meeting depending on where our progress is. But certainly, I like to have it done by June, so that we can implement it for the next fiscal year. That's kind of where we are in terms of the strategic plan. Superintendent Reichman, I think to add to Suke's list, I mean, we're going to have to start looking at the LEA issue a lot more closely. I know that we've been keeping kind of a running list of areas to kind of investigate, to gather our data so we can make an informed decision here. I don't know if that's going to be ready for May, because I know that a lot of your staff is working on the strategic plan. But if we can have something to view, that might be helpful. So not just the finances, whether we're going to lose money or not. I mean, that's one thing. But if we can look at what the other details that it means to be an LEA, what are the other things that we need to do that we're not doing, if anything, and what are the things that other operational changes that we might have to make, even things that might seem unintended. We'll want to know that to the extent that we can. In May, and then of course this bill will likely either pass or not pass, by then. So if there's another, if it does pass, we probably want to talk about what it means, and we'll probably have to work with ADE on that. So we'll certainly want a status update if it passes, and if it doesn't pass, we'll also need a status update of how that's going to affect the agency for the next year, until unless and until we come to the next legislative session with some additional legislation, if any, if the board decides that. Okay, is there any other item for next time? PV?
Yes, I would like to add an item to the agenda that if a decision hasn't been made, then a clarification of whether that motion passed or failed. I'm sorry, the interpreter needs to clarify. We need clarification regarding policy as to whether that motion 7.01 passed or failed.
Yeah, no, that will, the agency is gonna consult with the experts on that. I mean, we should have that tomorrow. I mean, if not Monday.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, no, that'll get taken care of right away. We just need to research some of our orders. I don't think that situation's happened before since I've been on the board, and we need to do some more research there. I'm sorry. Okay. All right. That is 8:02. And 9:01 is our action item adjournment. We have a motion to adjourn. Lynn?
I motion that we adjourn.
Is there a second on that? Suke, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? No, good. All right, that passes. Again, thank you to everyone. I know this board meeting was a little bit longer than we normally have, but we had a big agenda today. Thank you to the interpreters, to the media, and the other staff that assembled this. I think it's, again, you guys have gotten really good at producing this, and certainly I think you should be proud of the work product today. And again, thank you for the board. We did have quite a hefty agenda today. We're going to meet next month to talk about the strategic plan and get that almost to the finish line, I think. And I look forward to seeing everyone then virtually. But other than that, have a good night, and thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you. Good night,
Thank you,
everybody.
Dave. Bye-bye.
Yeah, have a good night.
Right.